So Does It Matter Live, kind of our Substack Live a program that we're doing. And I guess I would say this before we get going. I started doing these about 4 weeks ago. And the first couple I did is monologues. And the number one thing that I got from people is, can't you have a guest? So then I reached out now and I had Katie Grimes, who was my very first podcast guest, the editor in chief of the California Globe. She came on as my first podcast guest last year. We've now had over 50 podcasts. And now I'm doing this weekly Substack Live. And I had Katie do my first Substack Live to kind of test it out with me. And then last week we had Will Swaim from California Policy Center on. And then I have gotten so many questions and calls from people about LA city politics that I reached back out to someone else I've had as a guest on my podcast, Matt Klink. So Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Matt comes to us from the belly of the beast. I was born and raised in the city of Los Angeles, but then I did the proverbial escape from LA, and I live here in Orange County. But Matt's still there, still fighting for truth, liberty, justice in the American way, and all of those things. And so, what we're going to do for the next probably, well, till 1 o'clock, unless people run out of questions or Matt and I run out of things to talk about, which I don't think is actually possible. We're going to be talking about LA city politics. We're going to be talking about LA County politics. And then I told Matt, we're going to delve into the politics of the governor's race because I've got some things I want to say. And Matt's got some things I'm sure he'd like to say about it. So we're going to do that. So the one thing I would just ask for those of you that are watching is, if you've got questions for either one of us or both of us, feel free to use the chat feature. And then kind of the way this goes down, because I've now done this for several weeks in a row, we'll ultimately have, and we're on track to probably have about 100 to 150 people come in and actually experience some or all of this live. And then what we do is we publish it. And then it's kind of like a podcast at that point, right? It's a published podcast. And like I'm looking right now at the numbers for last week when we did our one with Will Swaim, we had 153 people watch it live. And then we had 1,703 people watch it after the fact for Substack, because I looked into it. In order to trigger watching it, it means you've got at least 10 minutes in. So if you've watched it for 10 minutes, it gets a count. So that's pretty good. So we'll see if you can be more magnetic and to draw more attention, Matt. So with that, let me just try to introduce Matt. I'm going to butcher this and do it all wrong because when I had him on my Substack, we had fun and I had ChatGPT draft a great introduction for him. My introduction is now off the cuff and it's going to be much shorter. So Matt Klink has forgotten more about politics in Los Angeles and Los Angeles County than I have ever known. I'll say that. I'm going to set you up for the fall. Matt is a long time conservative political consultant in Los Angeles. When I say conservative, I mean not like, what will I say? I'd say that if you're in a city like Los Angeles, Matt believes in the primacy of the voter, the taxpayer, believes in common sense in that city, and he's and when you compare him to the people that run the city, he's like Attila the Hun. It's like that.
That's true.
Matt is the proprietor of Klink Campaigns, and Matt runs the gamut. If you're doing a ballot measure in the city, Matt can help you with it. If you're doing a public affairs campaign in the city, Matt can help you with it. He's really smart. I've been able to be teamed up with him on projects where every time there's a meeting, he's the one coming up with ideas and strategies that no one else comes up with. So that's it for my business pitch for you, Matt. So you don't have to do it for yourself. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
there you go. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Lots to talk about. We talked about a month ago, and it's finally starting to get really interesting.
It is. So I think we should start out with the mayor's race because that's kind of the title bout here. I'll set the table briefly, but this is,
Sure.
I've had several of my nanny state supporters comment that I don't let my guests talk enough and that I treat it as like my show with your like I'm Johnny Carson and you're Ed McMahon and it's supposed to be the other way around. You're the guest on the show. So I'll just say there's been a lot of profile on the governor on the mayor's race. And what do you think about it? You talk to me. We'll do it that way. I'll let you say.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, look, I think that everybody was waiting to see what Rick Caruso was going to do for the mayor's race that's up in November of June and then in November of 2026. And when Rick Caruso made the decision not to run at the last minute, we had a Democratic Socialist city council member, Nithya Raman, throw her hat into the ring literally 3 weeks after she had endorsed Mayor Beth for reelection. And then we have some random reality TV star named Spencer Pratt jump into the race that, unless you watched The Hills when it was a big thing on TV, I never did it, so it wasn't my thing. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody thought he was going to be credible. Well, fast forward to last week, and we had one of the few mayoral debates, and Spencer Pratt was awesome, to say the least. He completely exceeded expectations. He speak with just common sense that, he's not a but things that you're like, well, of course that should work. In the meantime, Mayor Bass is, she's an incumbent in trouble. Incumbent mayors in LA running for reelection, you have the ultimate advantage because all of the special interest groups, meaning the labor unions, they're going to contribute big money to make sure you're reelected. And then Nithya Raman is in the race, and right now she's the third candidate, and she's not performing the way an incumbent politician should, and she's in, according to the latest Emerson poll, she's in third place. So
but barely, right? So the math question really is going to be, can Bass eke her way out to 51%? And is there a point at which, if the aforementioned special interests do their own internal tracking and they determine that she may not be able to get there, would they then get engaged to try to help Pratt come in second? Because, of course, if you're Karen Bass, you'd much prefer to go into a runoff against a MAGA Republican in Los Angeles. For those people who don't know it, I'm going to guess, and I think Matt will have a better guess, but I'm going to say 16, 17% of the vote will be from Republicans, maybe.
yeah,
And then
I had heard 13, and then someone
okay.
said 15 the other day.
Yeah, it has to do with, if the turnout's lower, Republicans that are there are hardy folks. Imagine if you're in a precinct that has 150 Democrats and 4 Republicans, you are committed, right? You're committed, right? And so you get some weird dynamics. As a matter of fact, didn't I see an ad? Wish I was high tech enough to share the ads on the show here. Didn't I see an ad that came out from the police union, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, translation, public employee union representing police officers. Didn't I see them coming out with an ad that was basically a Spencer Pratt ad? So maybe they're already at it. It was an ad that purported to be an attack on Spencer, but if that ad was played to moderates and conservatives, would help get out his vote.
I don't think it was a PPL ad. I thought it was from the other unions,
Okay, all right.
SEIU or those unions. Yeah, and basically what they said was, they talked about Spencer Pratt not wanting to fund housing for homeless. And then they said, and Spencer Pratt wants to hire more police, not more social workers. Again, it's one of those things you're like, what?
This is what they're streaming on Fox News.
Yeah.
There, because again, and to go back to the math again for just a minute, for those of you who didn't see it yesterday, I did an extensive analysis of the Emerson survey, and if you email me, which can be just reply to any email in your inbox, I will give you access to the part where I analyze if you're not a paid subscriber, I put the analysis of the LA part of that survey for my paid subscribers, but I'm happy to make it available to others. Hold on a minute. I think I just cut off. Hold on a minute. Sorry, my screen turned off. But again, we get this math equation, and the question is going to be, if Bass can't get to 51%, which I think is very probable,
Yeah.
because if you're sitting in the 30s, that means you've got a bunch of people who they haven't made up their mind. But if you're the incumbent, and they haven't made up their mind, if you're a kind of a conservative or a Republican or a moderate, you're going to say, well, Spencer Pratt's a great option, whether I think he can be mayor or I simply want to protest Bass. And if you're a liberal in the city, you've got Rahman as an option. So
Yeah.
it makes it hard for her to get to 51. Obviously, if she's close, they'll try. But if not, then the real question is simply going to be who comes in second. And the Emerson poll, which, let me give the caveat to everybody, they only interviewed 320 or 325 or 350 people for their survey. So that creates a plus or minus margin of error that's got to be 5, 6,
Yeah.
7%. I mean, really big. But you can get trends and you can kind of broadly see where the race is. And so, in essence, with that large of a margin in error, I would say that Pratt and Rahman are basically tied for second place. And it's going to be interesting to see, again, I think it's entirely possible. I hear from my sources that Pratt's had a decent chunk of fundraising that's come in from his social media. But when I say that, we're probably talking hundreds of thousands, not millions. Nothing like what Caruso spent 4 years ago, which was crazy. And so I think it's entirely possible that the special interests in the city might spend more to help Pratt than Pratt spends to help Pratt. I mean, we just saw that like last year when Steve Garvey was the recipient of love from Adam Schiff in
Adam
the U.S.
Schiff.
Senate race, and Schiff spent millions of dollars promoting Garvey to Republicans. Millions of dollars. Garvey spent 500,000.
Well, and John, that I'm not leaving what you're saying about who the best people want to run against. What is also unspoken is that there are actually two Democratic Socialist candidates on the ballot. There is another woman named Ray Wang. And if you look at that Emerson poll, she pulls in roughly 4% of the vote.
Oh, yeah.
Every vote that, whoa,
You're here. We see you.
okay, my screen just went completely. There we go. I probably what just happened to you.
Right, you
Every
got to
vote,
hit the space bar every few minutes, and then it won't.
every vote that Ray Wang gets is a vote that she pulls directly from Nithya Raman, and it's just because the DSA candidates, they can't agree to have Ray drop out.
Right.
She was
How
actually
many
in the race before
how many
Nithya.
how many candidates actually, like, if you're a voter and you open up your ballot, you were a voter, you open up your ballot, how many candidates are listed for mayor on the ballot?
There are quite a few. I don't remember that. It's not as many as there are for governor, which was it's like 6 columns for governor. But I think that there are probably a good 10 or 11 candidates,
Right.
most of whom nobody has ever heard of.
So this will be more game playing. So not only we know we're going to see ads that promote Spencer Pratt, right? But now that you've told me that, I think it's very likely that you would see ads targeted at young Democrat voters on behalf of this other socialist to try to drag votes away from Raman.
Yeah, that's very possible.
This is the game that's played, everybody. If you want to feel cynical about it, you should, because this is what's happened to politics lately.
Yeah, I mean, if you know you can't get the 50% plus one, then let's choose the opponent that I want to run against in the general election.
So is it fair? Are you ready to make your bold prediction? Do you think Bass can get to 50% plus one?
I would be highly surprised if she could, in part because, look, I think you said it earlier, you were referencing it. The undecided voters right now, they're not waiting to decide whether they're going to vote for Karen Bass or not. Would have been with her to begin with. I think that they're gonna. It might even be that they're a protest vote. To be honest with you,
Right.
they don't like my. My wife is a classic example. She doesn't like what the mayor has done. She will never vote for a socialist. And Spencer Pratt, she says, has no experience. So will she return to Karen Bass? I don't know, but that's I think why there's this question mark in the air right now. But Mayor Bass is vulnerable. And I got to tell you, Spencer Pratt, I don't know if he's going to be successful because I don't know if clicks on an ad equate to votes on the ballot.
Right.
But he's making this really interesting. He's being smart and clever. And he's talking about LA voters are angry. That's kind of a given across the board. They don't like the homelessness situation. They don't like the housing. Everything's expensive. The city is not doing the meat and potatoes of governing. So it's like, why do we want to give the incumbents 4 more years? It doesn't mean anything's going to change. So it's just that, and Spencer Pratt is at least he's poking that sore spot and making it bigger. And frankly, he is making the race, I think, more thoughtful than it would have been if it
Right.
were Mayor Bass versus someone else.
So I have my own theory, but I'll ask you. So what is it that makes Raman dangerous in a runoff?
As I have been told by friends of mine, in particular Fernando Guerra at Loyola Marymount University, there is a strong progressive core in Los Angeles, particularly among young voters. And they don't like the status quo, and they don't mind a disruptor candidate, and they're more aligned with the Democratic Socialists than they are with someone who is a disruptor who's right of center.
Right.
And It would, yeah,
It kind of seems to me, and maybe you just said the same thing, and I'm saying it a little bit differently. If Spencer Pratt goes into the runoff, there's still only one candidate in the race who visited Fidel Castro in Cuba, and that's Karen Bass.
exactly.
And so the ramen voters end up moving to Karen Bass as the lesser of two evils against the MAGA Republican, right? Versus if Pratt drops off, you're going to see a bunch of Republicans that are like, these people are both crazy, but we hate Karen Bass, and I could see a bunch of protest votes coming from most of the Republicans for Rahman simply saying it can't be worse. Right?
Well, be careful what you wish
Oh, I
for in
know.
that
Of
one. I
course,
mean,
I agree
yeah,
with you, but I could see that happen because the reality is that Karen Bass has become a symbol to a lot of Republicans. At a very let's put it this way, at a very minimum, I don't think Bass could count on those votes, most of them.
no.
And so you could see an undervote where Republicans just say, okay, the choices are rat poison or battery acid. I think I'm just not going to vote.
I'll just sit in my hands and skip that race. And
And I
it's a
should say
tough.
right now, if anybody who's watching has a question about the LA mayor's race, you don't have to. We're going to pivot off of it in a moment and talk about some other things. So if you've got a question, put it in the queue. My experience, by the way, for all you people out there is that everyone seems to be hesitant about engaging with us, and that's fine. So I just don't want to move on to the next topic and have somebody have a question about this topic. So I
I
will
do, yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Go
I
ahead.
sorry, I could. No, I do think one thing that I do think we should spend at least a few seconds on is look at if the people on this live feed, if you haven't seen some of the ads that are one run by Spencer Pratt or two run by Spencer Pratt's supporters that he's forwarding, I strongly recommend that you do so. They are absolutely fantastic. I mean, he has the one that everybody talks about is he stands in front of the mayor's residence. It's called Getty House, and then he stands in front of Nithya Raman's house, and then he shows homeless tents in the background, and then he stands in front of his trailer in Palisades, and basically says, "This is their home. This is my home. They caused this." But the other ones, they're AI generated. It's Spencer Pratt as Batman, or not Kamala Harris. She is in some of them. Mayor Bass as Darth Vader with the helmet on. I mean, they are incredibly creative and they're getting millions of clicks. But that's where the what I said earlier, do clicks translate to votes? Because one ad has 10 million clicks. Well, there are only 3.8 million residents in the city of Los Angeles. So clearly, people across the United States are looking at these things. But that's why what he's doing is creating such an uproar.
Yeah, he is. I think I might have the ability to share my screen and show an ad. I just got
Oh,
to figure out. So hold on a minute. You posted one on your page.
I have two in mine. Yeah, I had a link
Hold on a
to.
minute.
Okay.
We're gonna try this out and see what happens. I got to do Matt Klink on YouTube, and that should pull you up. There you are. Oh, look, Matt Klink breaks down the tax measures from 3 weeks ago. You should all make sure you go find Matt on YouTube.
Yeah, it's
But
at
there's video.
at the Matt Klink
All right,
is
so I
my
found
YouTube.
one of them here. I found it here. So hold on a minute. People, work with me here. We're going to try this out as we try technology and see if it gets the better of us because I've got a button that says share screen. So, okay, show what's exactly on my screen. And I'm going to say allow. And then I'm going to share this guy here, Spencer Pratt ad. And do you guys all see that?
Yes.
Who knows if you see? All right. Well, here we go. I'm gonna play this ad for everyone.
This is what Mayor Vassal is. You notice something? Here, we're going to give Romney's $3,000 They don't have to live in the mess they created. Where you live. This is where I live. They let my home burn down. I know what the consequences of failed leadership are. That's why I'm running for mayor. For my sons and the rest of us Angelinos that want to stop these corrupt politicians from destroying our city. We are going to get the golden age of Los Angeles back.
Yeah, that's great. And then didn't you say you got another one on here?
No, I think that that's the only one. In my Substack yesterday, I linked to the other one.
Well, okay. Well, let's go to your Substack. We got a minute here. Everyone likes, I'm sure, wants to see these things. So, by the way, you should all be signed up to follow Matt on Substack. You just go to Matt Klink, right? Click. I got click.
There you go.
Not work. There you go. Klink right here. Here's his Substack. See where I'm subscribed. I'm a paid subscriber. to Matt's stuff, which that's up to you and your budget. But so it's in this piece here.
Yep. And it's go down and we just played right there. You just passed it.
By
Go
the way,
back
this
up.
is the piece. This is good to promote you, Matt. No
Yep.
AI isn't breaking politics, exposing the status quo. And Matt's got an entire article about AI in this race. So that's just
But
an
if you,
example.
that's what we just saw that. So keep going down. And right there, the AI generated Batman Spencer Pratt video.
All right, here we go, everybody. I'm going to try to enlarge my screen.
Please, I'm begging you. This homeless drug addict to go to the schools. My children aren't safe. Put sense into my game. I could get you a free pussy. It's not close. That's already sucking my life. I just want to rebuild my home. It's been over a year. This is a sheet. We want to burn this town to the ground.
That's fantastic.
Pretty awesome, huh?
All right.
And that's where Karen Bass just went on. She was on CNN and she says, his ads are bordering on violence, talking about throwing fruit at people. And it's just like,
yeah.
come
So
on.
I see Scott said the volume. If you guys couldn't hear it, you could find those. Like I said, just go to Matt. You're on Substack. So
I'm on Substack. Yeah. Go to my Substack.
You can find it. But, and then Scott Powder asked what we expect the turnout to be for the LA election. What do you think, Matt?
Oh. Well, it's pretty dismal statewide. It's like 2.7% right now. It's a little lower in Los Angeles.
Actually, John Park put it's 2.7%. Actually, well, it's kind of complicated the way that he put it out. 2.7% of Republicans have turned out. 1.4% of Democrats have turned out, and 1.2% of NPPs have turned out. I think that's how to translate what John put.
Yeah. I think if we get 25 to 30% turnout, it'll be a pretty good number. But let's talk about what that does to who actually votes. It means that the electorate for Los Angeles is older, it's whiter, and it's more homeowners. So, I think that's going to be really, really interesting. In terms of, I think that will likely help. It will likely help Spencer Pratt, and it will also help Nithya Raman, because the most liberal voters are the socialists. The white homeowners, primarily on the west side.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. John says that the overall turnout is 1.6% right now. Yeah. And there is some discussion that because Democrats really aren't clear on who they want to support for governor and that race is mixed up, that there may be a phenomena where Democrats are waiting to vote because they're waiting to see if the governor's race settles a little more. I don't know. That would be more organic. I don't think there's like an organized effort to do that, but I could see where it's happening. So let's talk about the fact that not only does Los Angeles elect a mayor, Los Angeles elects a 15-member city council. So I assume they are not all up this year. So what can you tell us about these council races, at least the ones that matter?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. So all of the odd number districts are up this year. So a couple of them are not interesting just because the candidates are good people, and they will win easily. And that's Katie Yaroslavsky in the 5th Council District. You may know the last name. Her father-in-law is Zev Yaroslavsky, who county supervisor and was on the city council as well. And then Monica Rodriguez represents the East San Fernando Valley in the 7th Council District. She's a former realtor. She's good. Again, she's a Democrat, but she's pro-business most of the time, so she should win pretty easily. The interesting part about these council races, though, is that the attempts by the Democratic Socialists of Los Angeles to continue their winning ways. So Nithya was the first Democratic Socialist candidate elected, and that was 6 years ago. Then 2 years later, 2 different council members in the 1st district, Eunices Hernandez, and in the 13th Council District, Hugo Soto Martinez, ran on the DSA platform and they won. So both of them face re-election this year. And the time to defeat a candidate for city council, obviously and not in there, is their first re-election. That's when they're the most vulnerable. Because once they get established, it's really hard to take them out, and they will generally serve their full 3 terms. So Eunices, again, all of the traditional democratic socialist, platforms, free stuff for the homeless, lax free, well, taxpayer funded, but she calls it free, lax immigration enforcement, defunding the police, money not to officers on the street, but to social workers, subsidized rent, attorneys for tenants, all of the things to make LA a true workers' paradise.
So
Um,
are there a few races that seem to be hot spots where they're very competitive?
Yeah, so that's one. The first district, she's drawn a really good challenger. Her name is Maria Lou Calanche. She's from the district. I mean, this is the downtown area and east of Los Angeles, like Lincoln Heights, El Sereno, that part of Los Angeles. So then the other one is Hugo Soto Martinez is running in Hollywood. He's probably going to win in the reelection this time meeting in June, which will be actually quite interesting. What I had said, and I wrote on my Substack about 2 months ago, we should be trying to tie up these incumbents, the first and the third, if for no other reason that if they win outright in the primary, all of those Democratic Socialist workers that come in from Portland and Seattle and other places, they'll go to other council districts and they will work to elect more Democratic Socialist candidates. So I think that the first, Ulysses, is going to face a tough reelection. The other really hot election is the ninth council district, and that's an open seat. And that's, if you're looking at LA, it's City Hall and South. So it's a different district that has historically been represented by an African American candidate,
Right.
but it's an African American representative because of who votes, but it's a Latino district by who lives there. And this is the year that it finally switches over to a Latino council member. And it will be interesting because talk about the dilution of Black voting strength in the city council. There will be, instead of 3 Black candidates, there will be 2 Black candidates on the city council after this election. So Jose Ugarte is the current council member, current Price's chief of staff. He's running against a Democratic Socialist candidate called Estuardo, and I'm going to
You're gonna butcher it up again?
Mazoregos, Estorado Mazoregos. There are a lot of candidates in that race. That one's going to go to a November runoff, but those are really the 2 front runners. And the other, I think probably the most important race on this ballot, though, from a council standpoint, is the 11th council district. And that's Tracy Parks, or Tracy Park, single, P-A-R-K. She's running
Hold on
against
a
a
minute.
Democrat.
Before you talk about her, I've got to say this because I got to give her a little bit of credit. So I wrote about this earlier in the week in the California Post, and then I
Yeah.
posted it up on my Substack. But at the last council meeting, 14 members of the LA City Council, of 14 of 15, voted to advance a new policy for the city to start to look towards having non-armed city employees do traffic enforcement in the city instead of the police. So like I don't even know how that would work, but it's crazy. But it's worth noting that the only member of the city council that did not vote for it was Park, and I suspect she was absent because I would imagine if she was there, she would have voted no, and there was no recorded vote from her. But I don't think it's a coincidence. I think she didn't want to be there for that garbage. But
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, look, she won that seat. Mike Bonin, he wasn't a Democratic Socialist, but he was very progressive. He turned out and she beat a super liberal candidate. And this is one of those funky, shows the size of these districts in the city of LA. So Tracy Park represents from Venice all the way up through the Palisades. That's a lot of territory.
So I have to ask this question. Does she have a little bit of a challenge losing a bunch of more moderate voters in the Palisades who have now left and aren't registered to vote there anymore?
I think that that's a huge concern if those people who were there don't vote there. I think and I'm sure she's trying to encourage the Palisades area to turn out and vote for her. But she is organized laborers and not the police union, but she's the SEIUs and the service employees and the hotel workers.
Right.
Unite Here, Target. Faiza Malik is the Democratic Socialist candidate that she's running against. She's a good candidate. She knows how to win that district, but again, it's going to be It's
No,
going to
she's got the 2 votes that matter the most in the whole district because my mom and dad, who live in Playa Vista, are voting for her.
excellent.
They've
Yeah.
got her, and my mom's actually been a big fan of her social media presence
Yeah.
and said that, again, she makes sense.
Yeah. She's done.
The bar is low in LA, and so she exceeds it, and, well, we'll see what happens, right? Obviously, if you've got so many other colleagues that are just, batshit crazy, I'm sure it makes it harder. Well, hopefully she will prevail. And then there's some stuff on the ballot. I wanna kinda run through those really quick. Why don't we start with there's a property tax that they put out at the exact same time. So let's talk about that first.
Well, and to be honest with you, the crazy thing is that it's not even it's a Prop 218 ballot, which me and everybody's going, who cares? What is that? Unless you are a property owner, you don't get a ballot. And what the city wants to do, and listen to this, it's absolutely insane. So there's a huge problem in the city of Los Angeles with copper theft, meaning that criminals are going in and they're literally pulling the wires that string the streetlights together. So the streetlights don't work. And then they sell the wire for whatever a criminal sells wire for, whether it's crystal meth or fentanyl or whatever. So, mind you, the solution is not to replace the copper wire and have tougher enforcement. Mayor Bass's brilliant solution is let's convert all of the streetlights over to solar. That way we don't have to worry about the copper wire anymore. Well, that's really expensive in a city like Los Angeles. So they're going to do
Among other things, it would be very expensive, but of course, it would be contemplated that union member city employees would be doing all of the work.
well, yeah, it's a jobs program as well. So the interesting part is property owners get ballots and it's a weighted vote based on assessed valuation of the property, meaning how much your property costs. And the fascinating thing is that
Yeah, I read about this. Like, if you have like a regular single family home, right now you have a current assessment which will expire, which is like, let's say if you have a regular home, I was reading that maybe you're out $40 a year. But
yeah,
under the new scheme, it'd be more like 150 or $200. But if you have
correct.
like let's say you have a building, you could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes into this
Correct.
thing, which is supposed to raise, I think, $160 million is going to come right out of the pockets of everybody to go into this big public works program.
Well, and here's where it's really screwy because so they mail the ballot and a lot of these owners don't live in the city. So they don't know that they're going to get a ballot. Every ballot that is returned obviously is counted yes or no. Every ballot that's not returned is deemed a yes vote.
Really?
Yeah.
It
So
sounds to me like the law surrounding Prop 218 was written by people that want to get yes vote.
yeah, they make it really, really difficult. And I know that some of the larger utilities were talking about trying to fight it. And I said, look, you're going to have to do mail to these people to make them aware of it. You're going to have to mail before the ballots come out, mail after the ballots come out, reminding them to vote. And I think most people are going to just say, I don't understand this. What is it? And as I do,
Yeah.
when people are confused, they don't vote or they vote no.
Right. And then
So
on top of it, and we call it the bait and switch, right? So what happens is you already talked about all the crazy spending priorities of the city council.
yeah,
So this is what happens, by the way. This is not unique to Los Angeles. It's let's spend all of the money on the crazy stuff that are priorities for us and the people we care about. And then for basic services that everyone expects, like, I don't know, streetlights, let's go back to people that pay taxes. We need more money or you won't have streetlights, right? They're not saying, oh, by the way, if you vote no on this, I guess we'll have to stop funding all the crazy stuff because of course we need streetlights.
yeah.
That's not, so the whole thing is nutty. So it's likely to pass. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. Well, and John, to show you how crazy the city of LA's politics are. So the fire department just qualified a sales tax increase to fund the fire department. And I have my liberal friends and living in LA, I've got a lot of them. How could you not support more money for the fire department? And I said, it's not that I don't support the fire department. We need them. But you're telling me that in a city's budget that everything else that they're funding is so important that they can't afford to fund the fire department, so they have to reach into my pocket to tax me more money. And they go, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." And I'm
Yeah,
like, well, how else do you think about it?
well, they don't, and that's the
That,
challenge. Okay, so we got that tax, and then you said is there anything else on the municipal ballot before we go to the county?
yeah, I was just so there's I think it's probably one of my favorite ballot measures just because of what it does. There's a measure.
Favorite in quotes, right? Because there's
Yeah, it's exactly. It's measure CB or Prop CB, which so as you know, the city of Los Angeles, they tax cannabis businesses and they allow them to operate, they collect a tax. Well, the city realizes that there are a lot of unlicensed cannabis businesses that are not paying tax. Measure CB would force them to pay the tax. And my response is if they're already not registered and not paying the tax, how is passing a ballot measure going to force them to pay the tax unless someone enforces it? So it just is, it's completely wacky in the mindset of, oh, maybe they just don't know they're supposed to pay a tax. I'm willing to bet that they know that they have to pay a tax, but it increases the cost of their product.
That's just crazy. All right, so then is there any other? I don't want to make sure I'm not missing another. Is that it for the city?
Well, there are two other
That's
ones. Yeah, TC and TT, which are, an online travel company's tax and a hotel tax for short-term rentals that, you know, the cities like those taxes because they don't hit residents.
right,
Anybody who visits pays them.
right, exactly. And then what's the county? The county's got cooking one,
They
right?
do. They have it's called Measure ER, and 4 out of 5 supervisors voted to put a 5-year half-cent sales tax on the ballot to allegedly to fund healthcare. And the interesting part, sorry, my nose is itching. Allegedly to fund healthcare. Well, if they did that, that would make the tax a specific tax, which would require a 2/3 vote under Prop 2 or Prop 13. Well, that's too big of a hurdle for them. So what they did is that's a general tax. So all of this money, if this passes, goes into the general fund.
Right,
And then
where supposedly the city will spend it on what they want.
they promise us that they'll spend it on that. How many times?
By the way, you see a similar situation this last year in Santa Clara County up in Northern California. There
Yeah.
was a sales tax increase on the ballot. Same thing. They needed it to be a general tax increase, but they got people like they got a lot of moderate Dems and they got the county DA to support it by saying, well, some of this money will go to law enforcement and all of that. And then it passed. And now there's a big fight because, of course, the Board of Supervisors has decided to spend it all on a bunch of social spending programs and not for law enforcement. And it's like the big ruse, right? Because you can't hold them to it because it was specifically not specific in order to
Yeah,
lower the vote threshold. So, you know,
exactly. Oh, and then the interesting thing is, and actually I have an op-ed in the Daily News about this today online. It will run over the weekend. That the state puts
hold on a
in.
minute, everybody. So if you want to see his op-ed, I'm sure that after a few days, he will put it into his Substack.
I will put it in my
Right. So if
Substack.
you sign
Yeah,
up for his Substack, you will get to read his op-ed without having to sign up for the Daily News, which is
it is behind the paywall. So Assembly Member Brian from Los Angeles County has put a measure on
shit.
the totally to put a measure on the ballot to remove the cap. The state puts caps on how much municipalities can raise taxes. Well, if Measure ER passes, it exceeds the cap that the state has. So even if it passes, the state needs to pass this legislation. And it's brilliant by Assemblyman Bryan. He says, this is not a tax increase. This just allows people to vote for tax increases. And it's just
Right.
like only in Sacramento does it. So it's like I wrote it said it's the uniparty, the Democrats who again, any solution, just find more money and reach into everybody's mind you at the same time that they'll then turn around and go outside to the Capitol steps and hold a press conference about affordability.
Yeah. Hey, and in order to perform our watchdog journalism function, when he said 4 supervisors, so the one supervisor who voted no was Catherine Barger, who's the one Republican on the County Board of Supervisors. The other 4 Democrats all voted to place this thing on the ballot. So as we move into the final segment here, we're in our last 10 minutes. I thought we would pivot and talk a little bit about the governor's race. So I have to ask, Matt, who's going to be our next governor?
If I had to bet today, it would probably be Javier Becerra.
Right.
Just because however, it's interesting. I was on Fox 11 this morning talking about it. If you look at the latest
Name dropper.
polling, I know, I'm sorry. If you look at the polling this morning, so the Emerson poll has Becerra at 19 and Steve Hilton and Tom Steyer tied at 17. The Binder poll, which interesting, David Binder is
That's the
Gavin
brother.
Newsom's pollster. He's really good. He's a good pollster. He's got Hilton at 23, Becerra at 22, Steyer at 15. So if it's a Republican versus a Democrat, as much as I think that we need some change, math doesn't work for Republican candidates in California.
And for people who don't know, there are millions, literally millions of more Democrats than Republicans in California. One of the things that I run into a lot is, there's a lot of demographic sorting that takes place. And so you end up like, for example, you get, millions of people in Orange County who never go to LA, who when I tell them that there are swaths of the city of Los Angeles where people have never met a Republican, they're like, really?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, and they vote. And there's a big group of them. And by the way, the great sort, as we call it, which is, red voters in blue states moving to red states and blue voters in red states moving to blue states is happening. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of migration taking place out of blue states by Republicans. And so the people that are moving, if you're moving from California to Texas or Florida or Idaho, wherever you're going, that's great for where you're headed, right? But the problem you leave behind gets worse because now you're not voting in California. And so when you see the population shrinking, as a matter of fact, I'm going off message, but they're estimating that California will lose 3 more House seats after the 2030 census. And that's primarily due to an absence of incoming migration, illegal immigrants mainly, and an outflow of red voters. So I think it's kind of interesting to mention that, for a while, everyone was all caught up in this idea that maybe somehow 2 Republicans could get to the runoff. I didn't prescribe to that, but, it was talked about, especially before Swalwell imploded, because, his implosion really changed the math quite a bit because he went from having 15% of the vote to having 0.
Yeah.
And when you did that, it really winnowed the field. I'm not sure it winnowed the way the Democrats wanted to winnow the field, but it did have that effect. And so now you're in a scenario where I think that there's a very decent chance that Steyer and Becerra could make the runoff together, right?
Exactly.
There's going to be, so again, kind of like we talked about in the city of Los Angeles with the weird interplay dynamics. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to have people that, the Steyer is going to have every reason to forget Becerra. You want to drag down Hilton, which means you could see Steyer out there doing ads that are Steyer Bianco, right? He could be, and kind of like the same way that you saw Adam Schiff doing Schiff versus Garvey. That was about blocking Katie Porter, right? So now imagine that Tom Steyer goes up on Fox News and, sports shows with ads saying, you've got real progressive Tom Steyer, who's 100% pro-choice. He's 100% pro-environment, blah, 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 blah. Or you have Chad Bianco. He opposes abortion. He thinks everyone should have a gun, blah, 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 blah. And that's really all designed, again, to drive up Bianco's number to the expense. The one thing I will say in my analysis of the Emerson survey is I took some time to look for the soft vote versus the hard vote on the candidates. And there's a chart on my analysis. Bianco's support is very solid, but so is Hilton's. But there are like at least a fifth of Hilton's votes that are soft. So again, we're going to see some very interesting interplay coming up because if Steyer is clutching on to third place, look for him to do everything he can, and money is not his problem. So he's got a lot of problems.
Well, and I think you'll start to see that tonight. So tonight is the last gubernatorial debate. It's on CBS. Starts at 5:30 to 7. And I think you're going to see a couple things. You'll see one, an aggressive pile on Javier Becerra, primarily for that the news clip that came out of the hot mic on KTLA, where I mean, and look, I was talking this morning to the newscasters and I said, look, usually the handlers, people like you and me, we will go in and we will have that conversation with the reporter before the interview happens. But we always tell the candidate, you always assume the mic is live.
Right.
Always. And it's not like Javier Becerra is a neophyte who's never done this before. He just didn't think about it. And it's kind of bush league for the reporter to put it up on TV because that became the interview is irrelevant. That became the story. But it's now grist for the mill. So they're going to hit him on that, coupled with the allegedly losing the 85,000 children. And then Dana Williamson gets perp marched today. His former campaign manager gets perp marched today in Sacramento federal court.
Yeah. So
Take a plea deal.
The interesting part here is going to be the debate format favors Becerra because it's always, you have 30 seconds, you have 45 seconds.
Yeah.
And the real question is going to be, do these candidates now, out of almost desperation, just walk all over the moderators, walk all over the format so that they all could just attack the front runner over and over and over again? And it'll be interesting to see. So CBS, you can find it'll be streaming. Just go to YouTube and type in gubernatorial debate, and then you'll get to the streaming, and you can watch it at 5:30. And interestingly, a vast majority of people that watch this will be watching it tomorrow, which is now today for you people. And so it'll be interesting to see. You will have already had the benefit of seeing what happened. So I'm sure I'll have something to say about it, but we'll
But
go
if
from there.
but John, if it's really ugly, meaning if moderators lose control and it becomes a food fight, that's when people just say, a pox on both your houses, and they turn the channel. That's
No.
not good TV to hear three candidates trying to yell over each other for airtime. Okay, they tear down Javier Becerra, but I mean, Matt Mahan has spent a ton of money. He's in single digits still. He's at 7%, according to the latest Binder poll. I mean, he's not in the top 4 of the Emerson poll. So he needs to do something pretty radical to shake the race up if he wants to get in there. Katie Porter saying something.
I will say this as kind of a closing note on this topic. I will tell you this, for all of us, for me, for those people who are watching who think that Gavin Newsom has been a pretty bad governor, I think that whether it's Becerra or Steyer, if either of them become the next governor of California, you're going to look back and be like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I miss Gavin Newsom. So, and I hate to say that, but so Matt, I want to thank you very much. We're tying this up because I tried to keep it to an hour. So I wanted to thank you very much for lending your time and your expertise to this project. SoDoesItMatter.com. For those of you who don't know, I called it that because every time I'm thinking about whether to write about something, I ask myself one question before I write. So, does it matter? And I don't want to write about things that don't matter. And then, of course, the URL was available, so I grabbed it. So that's why it's called So Does It Matter. But I will make a final pitch. 2 things. One, if you want to help us and you want to help Matt and me and the cause, share this, right? You can hit the heart button. That means more people in Substack will see it. You could do that right now. You could do it later when you're watching it. And then also this will get posted up on YouTube as well. So you'll be able to share it there. And then last but not least, I'll give my pitch again for Matt is on Substack. He just posted his link there. And if you're watching this, sign up. Check it out. He's got a lot of interesting things to say. And with that, we're going to keep it to the hour that I promised it would be. And this will run tomorrow as more like a after the fact podcast for the bulk of people that will see it. And I guess we'll see what happens in the city of the angels.
Yeah.
See how it goes. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you spending time with us. All right. And thanks,
Thank you.
Matt. All right.
See you all. Bye-bye.